We quit going to the Catholic Church when all that hit. And what I was trying to say earlier is that my father-in-law...
I stopped going to Diddy's parties for the same reason. By the way, is anybody surprised at what they're hearing? Like, that's what I thought those parties were. Yeah. Anyways, I'm talking about the Catholic Church.
I know what
Go
you
on.
mean. You're funny.
From Indianapolis, Indiana, this is Truth Egg.
Hey, Daniel, how was your week?
Oh, look at
More
that.
of a transition. Not very good.
That was interesting.
Actually,
Oh, more?
this week, more? More? This week, I actually, back in 2012, I wrote Facebook for All-in-One for Dummies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wiley
remember.
Press, right?
Yeah.
Wiley Publishing. That's
Publishing.
right. And I looked up the reviews.
Yeah.
And I see that it's still being sold even
Shut up.
today.
How
People
much?
are still buying
Like how many?
these books.
Like 10
It
or
was useless.
1,000 or 100 or what?
I don't know the numbers, but I know that there are plenty of reviews from recent months.
Come on.
It's unbelievable.
Wow.
So I actually brought some with me today.
Oh, boy.
Oh, fantastic.
And
Let's see if you read mine.
yours is in here as well?
I'll let you know if I hear it.
Yeah, I do see 1 star here. Yeah, that must be you.
One
so,
star.
What the most recent one, which was in April of this year,
Yeah.
said this item was so old it was entirely useless, but yet they still gave it 2 stars. So that,
And
I
they
thought that
bought
was
it.
fantastic. Yeah, and
They
bought
paid
it.
cash for it.
Yeah. Here's another one. Nice cover, good format, lots of clear illustrations, lots of words that were readable, but no clear instruction on how to enter into the program and post your message.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey,
These people have too
You're
much
na-
time on
we're
their
talking.
hands.
you're nailing the audience.
I think.
Yeah.
I think this was.
Yeah, true.
I think this was an actual dummy. Yeah. It says. It says misleading title. Is the subject. Yeah.
Wow. I don't think you should read these.
I don't
ahead,
think
go
these
ahead.
people are smart enough to even listen to this podcast.
That's probably true.
Okay, so one more.
Okay.
This book really showed me how dumb I was to Facebook. It showed me many new things I could be doing, and I love it. So
Wow.
that's great. What a dummy.
Nice
LOL.
job. Nice. I think we have a guest with us.
Well, I think that we should introduce our guest. Aaron, why don't you tell us who you've brought with you today? Who did you drag into this little
Who
studio
did you
here?
pay to join us?
I can't wait to
today?
hear this introduction.
I know.
I should have prepared.
Even he's eager to find out who he is.
So I'd like to introduce you to my dear friend, Jon Arnold. I have known Jon close to 20 years.
Yeah.
Close to 20 years. We met for work reasons. You've been a designer of many things, but user experiences, right? Your primary focus still?
User interface, user experience.
I remember that video that was on your website.
Yeah, it
The
was.
little guys.
Oh, yeah.
It was
Yeah,
an
but-
example of like, hey, you guys, for every client we had, you should do something like this.
I'm flattered you remember that video.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, hold on. I remember when you took your kids out of school and traveled around the country in your, was it a
Yeah.
Winnebago? What was it?
It was a motorhome.
Motorhome, but not a Winnebago.
Not a Winnebago. It was
right.
a
So I remember
Coachman
that.
Leprechaun. 1999
Leprechaun,
Coachman
that's it.
Leprechaun.
There you go. Go on.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, and that's
intense.
another interesting fact about him is that you spent 2 years.
2 years, yeah,
and-
full time.
And plus, because you also hit a few areas that you didn't get on your initial trip. Just traveling
one
to every
extra.
state. Was it Alaska?
It was Alaska, and
then Hawaii.
And then we sold the RV to pay for 5 tickets to
I
Hawaii.
remember this. I remember Aaron telling me because I would
Pay
follow
for
your
5
blog.
tickets where?
To Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Yeah, that was the last box to check.
Yeah. That's
So
so
50
cool.
of our future 51 states.
And counting.
Yes, exactly.
counting.
And then lastly, we shared a passion of jujitsu going back
Yeah.
almost as long. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, the place I'm at now is because of you. And a lot of people said hi when I mentioned I was going to see you
Oh,
today.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Jon. And the reason that I thought it'd be interesting to have a conversation with him is, gosh, at least 10 years ago now, since you had sort of a a change of perspective, to put it lightly.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this. I would trace it back to
Just before your father died.
2006. So I'm getting close to 18, 19 years now.
When did your dad pass?
In 2011. So 14
Oh, so it
years
was
ago.
long before. I remember
A few
that.
years,
That,
yeah.
But that being, like, I was most aware of it.
Yeah.
When you shared your story about the glass smashing that you and your sister did
Oh,
at
yeah,
one point,
yeah.
which was amazing. But
I
prior to
love
that,
all these inside jokes.
yeah.
I know. I'd like to hear more about the glass smashing.
But prior to that, you've been very active in church, in leadership, worship.
Yeah.
Do you want to kind of start
so,
there?
I, like a lot of people, I grew up in a conservative Christian family, and my experience in that was overwhelmingly positive. And we can see where the conversation goes and as far as what's interesting. But long story short, I just kind of ran out of reasons to think it was actually true. And
Ran out of reasons.
yeah, and I fancy myself a pretty analytical person, and I like to understand things.
I
And
can't see that in you at
One of the
all.
most reasonable people I know.
I mean, I just like to. I want to believe true things. That's really what it boils down to. And
You want to believe what you believe is true.
There's the other end. of the
This
side.
is every conversation I've ever had with Aaron.
honest to God. it
I've
is
got a
the
thing
truth.
about people and truth and all of that,
Yeah.
but I would say, you're the most analytical and critical thinking of yourself, really.
I try to be.
Because I've not known you to be critical of other people in a general sense, but you can be
So-
pretty hard on yourself and your own beliefs.
That's for sure. Yeah.
Explain the truth piece. Meaning, you look for absolute truth, and I'm not talking faith, but I'm talking in general. Is that how
Just
you're wired?
philosophically absolute truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a tough one because I think at the end of the day, the only thing I can know for sure is that my consciousness exists right now.
Even that's a tricky one, but go ahead.
But everything else is some degree of probably. Or it's
Do my kids love me?
calculating
Does my
risk.
wife love me?
Certainty versus confidence, as you taught me.
Yeah.
Certainty versus confidence.
There's no certainty.
Yeah.
I mean, you can feel certain, but it's unrelated to reality.
Yeah, and growing up in the church, just confidence was just kind of it just kind of emerged. Of course, what we believe is true, and it wasn't until
What would we be doing here if it wasn't?
yeah, exactly.
Why else would we be
It'd
here?
be crazy.
and it was just a very painful deconversion process that I.
Painful.
Yeah, absolutely painful. And even that point might require some explanation because I feel like I've had a couple dozen conversations on this topic. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. And so I like to talk to people about this. And it seems like there are at least 3 different types of perspectives on this, at least that I've encountered. And that some people find this topic just wholly uninteresting. That faith and the idea of a God and how it affects your life, it was just never that big of a deal. And
Like
so
an apathy or an indifference.
I guess it would be.
Or you're talking about they don't find it interesting as a conversation, something to choose to talk about.
Yeah,
like when I'm
because-
hanging, this is not, I'm not talking
Right,
about.
it's intellectually and emotionally just unstimulating because the God proposition has played such a little part in their life. Okay,
And are these religious people that you're picturing it with this?
religious people probably no, but asked if they believe in a God or gods, they would say yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm automatically discounting all the people that would just flat out say I'm an atheist or I don't believe in a God. I'm talking about the subset of all people that would to some degree relate to being a theist of some sort.
Yeah.
And of that group, there's a pretty large section that, based on what I've seen, that just find it uninteresting because it just hasn't affected their life. And then there seems to be another group that on the topic of a particular God or what this God wants or doesn't want, they even don't find that particularly interesting, but the the rituals and the ceremony and the culture side of it has been a huge part of their identity. And so that's where they derive their kind of spiritual meaning and their connection to that particular faith. And then there's a group of people, and this is where I come from, where they grew up being convinced that they had a personal relationship with the creator of the universe
Who loved them,
had a plan for their life,
wanted them to do well.
yeah, and this promise of their consciousness surviving their own physical death and either experiencing eternal bliss or eternal damnation. And so when that not only affects one's identity, it is your entire world view of how you interpret how the universe works. And when that gets kind of pulled away, it is very disorienting. So something I've often thought about is if I could push a button and go back to believing, would I do it? And the short answer is no, I wouldn't, because I've like I said, I value truth and I want to believe true things, and I can't determine that that's true, so I don't want to believe it. But it would not be without some serious deliberation. Okay, But one of the things that helped me kind of get over that concept of needing a belief was something you said, and this was
something Aaron said.
That Aaron said, yeah. This was years ago. We were in my office, and this would have been probably late, I'm just going to say 2008. Okay, I'm just making that up, but it's something like that.
But that's a good guess.
Yeah,
I like
that's
that.
my best guess.
I do like
I
it.
concur.
Great, move on.
And I was, like, professionally was just not in a great spot. I had an office and employees, and
that sounds terrible.
yeah, and things not going well, and I was just on a really hot losing streak at the moment, and it was just, Aaron, you were at my office. It was just the two of us in our conference room, in my conference room, and I was telling you about this. And I think at this point, I know at this point, my faith was mostly gone, but I think I was still in the habit of appealing
Practicing.
to some supernatural language. And I remember saying to you, "Yeah, I just feel cursed." And you looked at me and with so much compassion just said, "Oh, Jon, the universe doesn't give a shit about you."
That sounds like Aaron.
Yeah, and I just remember that really sinking in, and in the best way, to think that it's just me living my life, that I'm not there's not a plan for my life that I might miss, that I'm not some game piece in like a cosmic battle of good versus evil.
You're not failing to live up to your purpose.
It's just life, and good things are going to happen and bad things are
And
going to
based
happen.
on what I know about you, you're not that special.
Exactly.
We're just okay.
And honestly, that was some of the best news I've ever heard. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Anytime.
I would, so there's 3 brands of faith relationship here at this table, or I guess not counting you. And I am probably right where you are.
Okay.
I had a point in time. So I grew up incredibly conservative Christian, immersed in church activities 3 times a week, going to church.
Yeah.
I was in a Christian rock band, toured all over the country,
Same.
did this for a living for a little while. And then I stopped.
How old were you?
I was 23 when I got into how old was I
When the wheels started falling off.
35, actually. 34, 35.
Wow. Boy, the similarities between our experience are remarkable.
Yeah. So one of the things that I saw happening through that period of time in the world is that so many people around me were also deconstructing, disassembling their faith or disconnecting from it in some way. And, but for the most part, I couldn't talk to anyone.
Yeah.
I couldn't talk Christians because they would say,
You're going
you
to
just
hell.
have to have faith.
Oh, it's part of your walk.
Yeah.
How's your walk? You just have to
Yeah.
have faith.
And
then-
I remember what I thought of people that think like I do
Isn't
now.
that wild? Because of all
Yeah.
people, you can juxtapose yourself in this moment against yourself in the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
How ashamed did you feel? Is that the right word even? That's just what came to my mind.
Clarify that question. How ashamed?
How ashamed
For losing your faith, or,
Nope.
or letting go of your faith?
Nope. For being an asshole when you had it.
Oh,
Because of how you would impose
how you
expectations.
felt
Yeah.
towards people going through what you went through before you
Yeah,
went through it.
I wish I could say I've changed my ways, but the truth is, I was a judgy Christian, and I'm a judgy non-Christian now, and
You're doing great.
I don't like that about me, and I'm working on it. But
It's too late. Write it
so
out.
why are you judgy on either side? Where's that
Well,
come
you're
from?
a judging, and that means a critical thinking person, like a ENTP,
Those are just words.
INTJ.
I'm pulling Aaron.
Yeah,
Those are just
so
words.
Why are you judging? Because he's observing.
That's what the media wants you to believe. That's right, Aaron.
yeah.
You're judging because you're observing
No.
and making sense of
But
the world.
I'm not putting words in anyone's mouth, but it sounded like you don't, I thought I heard you say, I don't like that about myself. I was judgy then and I'm judgy now. So the question became, so why do it then?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things I struggle with is perceived dishonesty. So intellectual dishonesty, real or imagined.
Yeah.
And I too often go to imagined. And so when someone can't, when I was a Christian, when someone couldn't understand the life-changing power of Jesus Christ, that felt like some form of dishonesty to me. Like they were just clinging, being just stubborn.
Stubborn.
Yeah.
hooked
Well,
on.
that's what was taught.
Yeah.
Right.
It was taught that, these people that are non-believers, they're non-believers because they want to sin.
Yeah, they
and
just
you were
wanna
also
sin.
taught to not
Yeah.
be stubborn, which is part of the system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys just need to go to the Catholic Church.
Well,
We don't
actually,
need that
Michael,
nonsense.
I was taking in a breath to say, and nobody does this better than the Catholic Church.
That's right. That's exactly
No,
right.
they have a very detailed and proven program of converting and containing and maintaining faith, and they know that it starts with brainwashing the kids. By the way,
does.
everybody knows, like that's what the point of
Yeah.
school is.
Yeah.
But the Catholics did it like it's systematized, and anybody who does it is only doing it
Right.
half as well
Right.
as them. And I don't
Right.
think it's wrong, but
Right.
So let me ask you a question, John. So do you feel at all uncomfortable? So you're joining this podcast to talk about this topic. So you don't feel uncomfortable with this topic, but do you feel uncomfortable with Christianity today? So you experienced it in the past, you lived it, but is it something that causes you any discomfort to be around it
and what
today?
what do you mean by
Like,
Christianity?
it might
like
be-
church or church culture?
Multiple things within Christianity: going to church, spending time with people that are practicing their faith in some way.
People
overtly.
interpreting their life through the lens of religion.
Somebody
Okay,
talking
gotcha.
to you, about their faith as though they assume that you're a part of it. Does that make you uncomfortable at all?
Yeah, and I feel like I've gone through kind of different phases over the last several years, because I remember when I first, let's just call the first season of Deconversion, just being able to admit to
Season, that's a very
myself,
Christian word. I like it.
being able to admit to myself that I'm no longer a Christian, which was a huge thing. I mean, to think that thought was revolutionary for me.
For you, yeah.
Yeah, and so during that time, I would have been incredibly uncomfortable being around other Christians, especially people that I used to go to church with, that I even started churches with, that I was in the youth group, that I played music with, all that stuff. Fast forward to today, I've gotten comfortable with kind of just how this shook out for me, and because this is one of my favorite things to talk about, I kind of welcome the conversation.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing I don't welcome is any kind of debate.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to change
Arguing
anybody's
for a
Or
point.
someone
Yeah.
trying to convert you back.
It's generally
or vice
not
versa.
productive.
It is
it's
not at
not.
all.
Yeah.
Reason is powerless
Yeah.
over deeply held beliefs.
Right.
Yeah.
Feelings don't care about your facts.
That's, we should dig
Yeah.
in on that. So reason is powerless over deeply held beliefs. I think that's true with everything.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you want to debate with someone when you're on either side of politics.
Well, heavens.
Like
Good grief.
there's only so much conversation that can even be had.
Yeah. And what those two have in common is some amount of emotional investment in the beliefs and some amount of identity.
I was
Yeah,
going to
identity
say
for
from
sure.
you, two things that I think you introduced that really affected the course of my intellectual life was identity protective cognition.
Yeah.
And when you introduced me to the street epistemology, and that was the first time I ever got to see somebody who basically was an expert at breaking down people's arguments.
By just asking questions.
Well, he's not just asking questions. Like he's using questions and he's using, what would you call it? It wouldn't be the Socratic
Yeah, it's the
method.
Socratic
It is
method,
Socratic,
yeah.
okay. But he knows what he's doing and he knows he's going to win because nobody's prepared for that process. And so as much as I enjoyed it initially, I started to get kind of, it's like, is it
off.
Charlie Kirk?
Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
He goes to the campuses and
That's so disingenuous.
It is.
well, it is because you're arguing with children who
Yes.
haven't even learned how to think.
Right.
Yeah, and
right.
you came there with your cameras and
That's right.
your
Yeah, that's
prepared
Oh yeah, we didn't
content.
see all
Yes,
that.
yeah.
But the point is, like I'm not impressed by it because it's like it's literally what you've trained for. It's
Yeah,
like
right.
it's like choking somebody on the street. Like I did it. Of course you did it.
Yeah, Daniel Penny.
Yeah, but going back to what John said, isn't faith really about your belief, whether it can be proved or unproved?
You can't prove faith. That's the whole point of
But
it.
that's right. That's my point.
So-
It has to be unprovable, otherwise it's not faith.
That's
Well,
correct. I would agree with
But
that.
I guess
Go ahead.
another way of putting that, so I lived in this world of embracing this idea of faith for so long, and eventually I just realized it was a synonym for assumption, and then I became a little uncomfortable with that because there's assuming something is fine. You have a data set that like if I'm going to go out to my car, I'm pretty sure it's going to start.
Right.
Mostly because I've tried it many times and it's been successful every time so far.
And it's a good car
So,
and you take care of it.
Yeah,
and
so there's
it's
lots
proven reliable.
of reasons to assume. I don't know a lot about the combustion engine. I understand some bullet points.
I don't
but
know how electricity works.
yeah, who does? No, there's no way to know how electricity works. So there's some assumptions going into that.
Sure.
So when people say you just have to have faith, as in like that's the core thing to lean into, I think that's complete bullshit.
Yeah, I'm not saying
even
that.
for a Christian.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm saying if the individual has faith, not saying what you just said, but
If they have a practice,
right,
is that what you
right,
mean?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. When I say the individual has faith, they have a deep-rooted belief within their faith. Right? They're not trying to convert. They're not trying to challenge. They're not. It's just within them.
Mm-hmm.
It's in them. Right? So, it's fascinating because I think throughout the walk of life, we get challenged all the time. We get challenged with spouses, children, work, politics, and
Arm wrestling matches.
Well, yeah,
everything.
midget tossing,
slap.
yeah, power slap, jiu-jitsu. It's just life is a challenge, right? There are no guarantees in life at all.
Some might say life is suffering. Someone should
Some
look
might
into
say
that.
Some might say that. You're absolutely right. I sent you both of you, a snippet from Anderson Cooper interviewing Stephen Colbert. And Stephen Colbert lost his two brothers and his parents in a tragic accident. And Anderson Cooper breaks down asking the question that Stephen has already said. So he's revisiting something Stephen said. And Anderson said, "There's no way you can believe this. Can you?" And Stephen takes a moment, and it's so genuine because there's this long pause. And he says, "Yeah, I do. I believe it because life is a gift. And with life, if you buy into that premise that life is a gift, there's tragedy that comes with your life.
Sure.
Whether you want to accept it or deny it or numb it or hide it, it's part of the reality of it, right? And so he goes on to his faith piece of that based on his loss and how he embraces that loss. It's fascinating.
I must have missed that text.
I just sent it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I sent it before we came
I have
over.
a lot of thoughts about that.
I know you do. I can see the wheel spinning. That's why I throw it out.
But
But John's got a couple too. I can see his wheel spinning
and
too.
I wanted to, if I could,
That's why I
just
tossed it out.
bring something up that
Okay.
is part of conversations we had years ago. Because of you, I don't bother to argue with people unless I know they like to argue.
He points at
That
me.
would be the three of
Well,
us
no,
in this
that's
room.
Daniel specific. Like we'll do some media stuff, and he'll have strong opinions. I will too, and we articulate them, and I enjoy it. It's
Yeah.
part
I'm
of our
the
relationship.
mediator.
It's how brothers hug.
Italian brothers.
We don't connect to our emotions very well, but we connect to
No.
all
Argument.
kinds of
No,
data.
no, those
Yeah.
are gross. But the combination of cherished beliefs and when we say identity protective cognition, delusion is a synonym for that. But the intersection of cherished beliefs and delusion is how everybody is operating in the world. That is their internal world, which they are projecting on the external world, and that's what they think real is. And it's never based in much, because so much is built, especially the older people get, so much is built on what they had to believe to get where they are, become who they are, that there's no point in arguing at all. The only interest I have in someone else's belief is if I see it's harming them and I care about them. That I might challenge or ask questions gently, because I've done it not gently, and that's why I don't have as many friends anymore. But I have this very firm belief that there's not a lot we can do that is true, because, as you know, you can't prove truth. You can only falsify something that isn't true. True just means it hasn't been falsified, right?
Do you believe
Neil deGrasse Tyson has a good
Yeah,
point about,
he
at
does.
least in science, you can't prove something is true. You can just falsify
Yeah.
something
okay,
based
sure.
on evidence.
yeah.
We can't know truth but you can assume true because there isn't. Faith is a step further, which is faith is belief despite evidence.
Yeah, I like to define faith as untestable trust.
I would agree with
That's
that.
my least snarky, but still feels
Yeah, I
like
would agree
reasonable
with
to
that.
me.
Yeah, that
I
makes
agree.
sense. Yeah.
Why is it?
But there is proof. It's just whether you choose to believe it.
No.
Yeah. No,
Well,
there's
tell me how you know that.
Well,
Well, I
he's
don't know
gonna talk about scripture and the Bible,
Sure,
right?
yeah, right.
So there's more evidence of Spider-Man than Jesus Christ.
all I'm saying.
So, right?
All I'm saying.
Great
all
movie.
I'm
I
saying.
wanna hear Michael's-
All I'm saying is, when you say there is no proof, I would argue there is some proof.
No,
Whether you choose to believe in that proof
you're
is
claiming something somebody wrote as proof.
correct.
Yeah,
And
and,
I
can I
deny
throw
that.
in maybe
Yeah,
the
please.
important distinguisher is sufficient proof, or actually I would say put sufficient evidence.
100%.
Yeah,
because
proof
I just,
is a mathematical term.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Lori, I'll digress here just for a second. Lori and I are going through this podcast. It's the Bible in a year. So each day it's right. It's kind of, and it's in chronological order. As we all know, the Bible is not written in chronological order, so
Yeah.
it's read right. We're going through this, and I just said the other day, man, wouldn't it be cool if God just revealed himself in some miraculous way for all of the world to see it?
It would be practical.
And then Lori looked at me and said,
Which he used to do until we killed his son,
right.
and then
Right.
nothing since.
Right. This is where I'm going with it. I'm like, we haven't seen anything since boom, boom, boom.
Well,
right?
or maybe we haven't believed it.
Well, possibly, right? So there's arguments to be made there.
Yeah.
But the conversation begat because there is so little proof today of what was written 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Relatively, yes.
And most Christians,
Let me.
most believers defer to, well, you gotta believe, you gotta have faith.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So
Sorry.
I brought an article just so I could reference a couple of things. So I actually got this in my inbox like a month and a half ago, and I knew that this was coming up, this recording today. So I saved it, which I never do because I'm an inbox zero kind of guy. And it says, so it's this article from the New York Times about believing. It was in the morning newsletter.
I read this.
Did you?
Yeah.
So that it says, just a couple of things I want to highlight. Almost all Americans, 92% of adults, say they have a spiritual belief in a God, human souls or spirits, an afterlife, or something beyond the natural.
That's a lot of stuff, but okay.
Yeah, so it's
a lot
broad.
of different things.
Yeah, it starts out.
Does it
it's
include
broad.
ghosts?
Yeah.
Okay, then yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it doesn't say specifically ghosts, but human
think it
souls
alludes
or
to it.
spirits.
Spirits, there you go.
An afterlife or something beyond the natural world. So, yeah, it's pretty broad. And then it says, it talks about how America was on a path to secularization, over the course of the last 40 or so years.
It's part of the communist agenda.
And that has leveled out.
Yeah.
That is actually not reversed yet, but kind of leveled
Yeah, the
out.
decline of Christianity is on pause.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly the way
It
that
hasn't
they
gone
word
up,
it
it hasn't
here
gone
too.
down. It's
You
just
did read
stayed
this.
stable.
I did.
Yeah.
And then it says there is, studies provide a sense of how that change or lack of change is going in the the America's faith.
Yeah.
There is overwhelming empirical support for the value of being at a house of worship on a regular basis on all kinds of metrics: mental health, physical health, having more friends, being less lonely. According to a guy named Ryan Burge, who's a former pastor and a leading researcher on this topic. So, which I actually believe that. I think that there is overwhelming.
Yeah, I concur. I would not dispute any of that.
Overwhelming. Finish that.
Data that validates the benefits of a faith and
Oh,
faith
it's
practice.
better to have faith.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Which
Well, hang on. It's better to have modern American Christian faith. Let's just be
Sure.
clear, because anybody talking about religion, it's
there's-
like, well, if you were born in America in the last 150 years, you're Christian, because
Right.
that's what you are if you're here.
That's the default, right?
And
Right.
unless you're
Right.
Jewish,
Right.
then you have that
Right.
option. But until recently, there wasn't much else.
Yeah. So what I think is interesting about that is how much the data points to there's a benefit to having faith and practicing
Clearly.
and that kind of thing. But also, when I was going through a change in my beliefs, it was because exactly what you said, John. I wanted to believe things that were true.
Yeah.
And there was a point in time. So I grew up even into my adult years, into my 30s. My faith was the most important thing to me. I was a little bit afraid to talk about it too much in front of people that maybe weren't comfortable with that, but it was the most important thing to me. And then there was a point in time where the truth, whatever that is, and I don't need to know what it is, truth was more important to me than faith. I actually remember saying that to
And
myself.
that is original sin.
Oh yeah. Well,
You have eaten from the
I'm
tree of the
finally
knowledge of
here.
good and evil.
I'm finally here.
And that's what happens when you do, is you are separated from God. They've been warning since the beginning of the book.
Yeah. Yeah. But I remember distinctly saying to myself, totally by myself on the inside of my head, truth is, I think I can accept that truth is more important than faith, which to me was fine, because but then Christianity is what I mean by that, by faith.
I have a question for the three of you. I'm looking for this title of the book, and I
Well,
can't
just
find
real
it. Sorry.
quick,
Go ahead. Sorry.
If truth leads me to
Faith.
validate Christianity,
Well, then it wouldn't be
that,
faith.
that shows me that truth and faith can be together.
No, you just denied the truth by proving it.
Right.
Oh no, I'm not the truth.
well-
I'm sorry, I got the word wrong. You've removed faith.
Yeah, you don't
By
need
insist-
faith anymore because you have discovered the truth of it.
which is the
Well,
foundation of the religion.
So in other
is
words,
the faith,
you're
not the truth.
you're
Or not
saying
the-
that it is necessary for it to.
faith requires
be-
doubt.
Well, I
No,
don't
that's
know
what
that I would agree
seminary
with that.
says.
I don't agree with that. I don't think faith requires doubt.
You did earlier. Oh no, that was Matt Nettleton. He
Yeah.
said yeah.
Yeah,
He's also Catholic leadership
Right.
stuff. He said, he goes, the people who were going to fall out first are the ones who were certain.
Yeah, right. The question for the three of you.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, if God put his hand on you today, literally, God put his hand on you, what would the three of you say or do?
Well, I went to seminary.
Well, but I'm serious.
For that reason. I felt
But
moved.
but
Do you mean that in the
I felt
literal
called.
sense?
I mean that
can
in the
you
literal
define
sense.
God,
I
like
mean the literal
a physical manifestation
physical
of a God?
manifestation of Christ or God, one and the same, literally touching you.
I'm telling you, it literally happened, although I was on a lot of acid. But I literally was grabbed and pulled out of madness.
But I'm curious.
And I was like, maybe there is a
I'm not trying
God.
to provoke. I'm just curious.
Yeah. I think it's a
I
great
think it's a
question.
good question.
I'm curious
But
as to what your
There's a lot of
reaction.
problems with the question, and
Yes.
let me tell you why.
Okay.
Because first of
John's
all,
like, I got next.
first of all, the very first part of it,
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to skip if because that's too deep for the length of this podcast.
Okay.
God,
Sure.
because everyone defines God differently, including within the Christianity. Because
Yeah, that's fair.
when you think of God, you think of a certain set of things. You might picture
Invisible sky daddy.
Would it help
you
if
might-
I
yeah.
become? Would it be helpful if I'm more specific with God?
Not for us.
Not
then why are we
You
debating
may-
this?
Let,
you
let
may
me
want
just
to.
quickly try to assemble this criticism really quick. So,
Okay.
so if a total stranger that you do not know, that you've never seen before, that you've never heard before, and that's never touched you before, came up to you and touched you.
I'm not saying that.
I know you're not saying that, but we have to understand. How would I know that this is God? Of course.
Let me be more specific.
Okay.
What if God descended from the sky for everyone to see and touched you? Would you then believe, or would you still not believe?
I think controlling that I have enough information, then I would say, sure, yeah. I'd be like, glad
Okay.
you finally made it.
You'd be like, where have you been?
Yeah.
right.
I'd assume it was
ahead, John.
AI.
I know you would. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, and the things, just some things that I would be looking for is I'm having an experience. Okay, so I'm putting myself in this question. So I'm having an experience of, and I can tell this is a God, or do I need to try to determine that it's a God?
It's abundantly clear.
But how do I know that?
Hang on.
because-
Can I
Go ahead.
suggest? I want to rephrase a little bit that I think will. What would be sufficient evidence of God?
There you go.
Because his example is a great example of. I think many people would be like, "Well, yeah, okay." At that point,
I think
But what would be sufficient
the
evidence?
issue
for
that we
you?
have is that we're assuming some scaffolding, right? So when we
Yeah.
say if
And yes,
you know-
it's a white Christian God, Daniel.
okay, good. Go ahead.
You would know in your heart,
So,
in
and
your mind,
I'm not
in
trying
your
to be
soul.
obtuse
No,
here,
you're
but
fine.
I'm
You're
struggling
fine.
to get past even that presupposition of the question.
Okay.
Like, how could I know?
How do you know your children love you?
Well, there's
don't.
There's a part of that.
Okay,
that,
Jodie Foster.
But I'm being serious. So
Yeah,
I
no,
mean, because that would be a.
well,
How do you
one,
know?
There's a history with your children, and there is also an introduction, like the whole pregnancy thing, and then bearing the children. There's so much that sets up identifying what you mean by your children.
I'm talking about
At
love.
risk of repeating, I want to reissue my suggestion of what would be sufficient evidence because they're going to pick on
Sure,
the
I know.
circumstance,
I know.
rightly
Right.
or wrongly.
Right.
And I
I
don't
know.
think that was the conversation
No,
you were
it
trying to
wasn't.
initiate.
Correct.
So, what would be sufficient evidence to change your opinion of God or the
So,
existence of God?
That it is God touching you.
the only thing I can think of is that I have no idea. I don't know what it would take to convince me of that what the experience I'm having is with a God. But my question back is, wouldn't a God know what would convince me?
Yeah.
And then, but just real
part of
quick,
the mystery.
You inserted the word convince, and I wasn't trying.
Yeah,
to
and
suggest
just to
convincing.
clarify that, when I say convince, I would be satisfied with just a high degree of probability.
Yeah.
A criticism I get
enough.
from my Christian mother is that she will say that I need absolute proof, and that's just simply not true.
Yeah.
I just need sufficient evidence for any God being probably true.
Yeah.
Because I don't have absolute proof for anything.
Yeah.
And you
And
don't
I- and I
need
would
God
even-
to not exist.
Right.
You've never had that position of being
I actually
atheist. I've never heard you say that you are not against the belief of God. You are unconvinced.
Yeah, I would say I have non-resistant non-belief that I am forever open to the idea.
Same.
It sounds great.
but-
I've been seeking it for years because
Yeah.
it sounds like it's awesome.
But I just I am admittedly hostile to the proposition of believing extraordinary claims
I can't see it at all.
without accompanying
And how would you have any
I can't see it at all, John.
how would you have any confidence in your current belief when you were so certain
Right.
in the past and now you're
Hence the
convinced
question.
Yeah.
that all of your belief was false? How could you ever have confidence in a belief again?
Yeah. Hence the question.
So let me try to answer the question without being a dickhead.
Well, you're being a dickhead, so try not to be a dickhead and just answer the freaking
agreed.
question.
I'm going to be on
God
Team Mike for now just to even
you
it out.
knew, the God you knew came down, literally has come down from the sky. You visibly have seen this transaction happen, right? Is touched you. Does it change you? Does it change your belief? That's all I'm asking.
If God
Don't get
convinces
caught up
you,
in the details. Don't
Yeah,
get caught
I
up
think
in
that-
trying to, no convincing, no anything.
doesn't have to be a left hand or a
Right,
right
right,
hand or a
right. Does it have to
Thursday.
be from
I
the back
would-
or the shoulder?
So I would welcome that. And then until I'm in that situation, I don't know how I would react because I have never had that experience in my entire life.
I haven't either. Go
And
ahead.
and then I would also just say that like the evidence, what evidence or what experience would I need to
Those are different things.
what would I? I'm trying to. What was the question you said earlier to reframe his question, which is
What would be
What would-
sufficient evidence to
what would be
change your
sufficient
belief?
evidence, and it would be some evidence,
As opposed to the
And-
none that you feel you've experienced.
Correct, and by none I mean there is plenty of circumstantial evidence that there are things that we don't know, but there is, that I know of, no evidence that is difficult not to tie to God.
Right.
Okay, so you can say, I don't know why it is, but everything on Earth just kind of stays on the surface.
Oh,
We don't know
gotcha.
why that is. Well, eventually we said, we still don't know why that is, but we're going to call
We're
it
going to call
gravity.
it gravity. Yeah, and we know
And-
how it works. We just don't know why.
And so you could say, well, let me help to explain gravity. God holds it all together. Love holds it all
It's
together.
all on
And
the
I-
back
and
of
I-
a turtle,
I think
and
that
it's
that's a-
turtles all the way down.
Yeah, and I think that that's a fantastic
Yeah,
conclusion, but it is so easily applied in whatever way you want. You could say, well, it's not that. It's more like the function of a magnet or whatever.
How about the universe if it was tilted 2 degrees to the left doesn't exist, right? I mean, that's real. That's not pie in the sky. That's
And we wouldn't be
legitimate.
contemplating it if that happened.
Right. Exactly. So I get where you're going. I understand what you're saying. I guess what I'm really trying to understand is that I'm going to insert the word hope, right? And it sounds like there might be hope
I
from
think
what
it's,
you said.
hope for me.
Well, hope in
No,
general.
that you have
in general.
you have some amount of hope
Yes.
that is leaving you open to wanting to be convinced.
I'm
I
going
heard
to say that I
phrasing,
had
too.
that in the past for years, and now I would say that I don't
You have less hope.
desire or hope
So-
that there.
So
So
just to
you're,
be
so
clear,
you're
yeah.
hopeless.
Just to be clear.
That's right.
So if God, go back to my original question, if God touched you, and you knew in all of your might, in all of your being, you know that's God. You forget definitions, everything else. You're saying that you would have no hope.
Well, you're changing the circumstances.
I am?
Yeah, right now that hasn't happened.
No, I'm saying if it were to happen. That's
If
the
it were
question.
to happen, I think that would be a great
So-
experience.
so then there is hope.
Potentially a great
So
experience.
then
yeah.
there's hope. That's all I was asking.
Sure. No, I don't
There's
think it's
hope for you.
No.
I don't think it's
you
hope.
have
I
hope
think
for
it's
him out of
openness.
love.
Yes.
What was Michael? What was the second part of your question?
gosh, let's
if I
get
could
back to
be,
that.
in fact, let me try to restate your question in a
Please.
way that is at least more palatable
dickhead.
for me. That if to my own satisfaction,
Yes.
if I could be convinced that I'm experiencing a
Yeah.
God, that this God is touching me and
Right.
has revealed him, her, itself
And that's
to
all
me.
positive.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and it's all
Thank you,
positive.
Aaron.
Okay,
Thank you,
so we're there. Okay, and I'm
Sure.
convinced this is happening.
Right.
What's the second part of your question?
Would you believe?
Well, of course.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
If
It's
but
emphatic,
but
right?
that's a way of saying isn't that just saying if I could be convinced?
No.
Okay, how's
I
that different?
kind of think it is.
I don't-
I hear what you're saying.
He's
Yeah,
saying
no.
if there was enough evidence to convince you,
Correct.
would you be convinced?
I'm not-
Yeah, that's what I hear you asking.
Yeah, and no, I'm not saying
Okay.
evidence. I'm not. I'm really not. And I'm
Okay.
not trying to convince or
Yeah,
honest to
understood,
goodness, I'm not.
understood.
I'm just asking for the two of you specifically, based on what you've said, if there's still an openness to the possibility that it could exist. And it sounds like from
Sure.
David's
Yeah.
side,
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
That's all
and
I
the
was
only
asking.
reason
That's
that
all I
I
was
don't
asking.
believe
Oh,
is
yeah.
because of openness.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah, so,
get
I mean,
that.
so one
But
of
if I may,
Go ahead.
Part of where I come from on all of this is the basic goodness in all of us, or the ability to have basic goodness, love, kindness, compassion, empathy, truth, and then
Virtues come from God.
yeah. And if you have children, which I don't, but I have 19 nieces and nephews, and I feel like we've raised 19 of those
Catholic.
little boogers. That I feel like that the three of you have this experience more than I've ever had this experience, and is the unconditional love that a child has for their parent.
yeah.
And
The parent has
I
for
would
the
say
child.
it the other way around.
okay,
But,
well, yeah,
My
okay,
kids are
so-
mostly indifferent, it seems.
and that's fair. Like I said, I don't have children, so I can't speak to that.
No, it's
but
the you loving them that's
more
the best
than them,
part.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
So-
great if they love you, but I think that's
so. For
hit and
example,
miss.
what's so great about how you love your child is that no matter what they do, you would always take care of them, rescue them, protect them.
You do everything
You'll
in your
put them
power,
over
right?
yourself.
Right.
You would
Yeah.
never,
Right.
ever send them to hell.
Right.
And that's not the thing that suspended my belief, but that was one of the things that I then later realized and thought I couldn't even see it that way until I stepped away from belief to where
Yeah.
I eventually said, because the way that I kind of disassembled or suspended my belief is by going through essentially an intellectual exploration, and then as soon as I found myself on the other side, I looked at a number of things that weren't that important to me for the sake of truthfulness, like the whole idea that God potentially, depending on which version of Christianity you believe, sends you to hell if you don't, figure out that he's real.
Right.
If you don't figure it out, I'm going to give you no evidence, and if you don't find me, you're done for.
Yeah.
And I thought about that, and I was like, this whole idea of made in his image. Apparently, he made us nicer than him to our kids. Whoops, that was a mistake.
Yeah, you could take argument with homosexuality, a gay marriage.
So
right?
I'm fine
Why,
with that.
why would God make me broken?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Not that those things are broken, but the point is whatever
Right,
the
right.
sin
Michael,
may be.
where were you going with the parent-child analogy?
Thank you. Are you done with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I go back to it? I was just trying to reference that there's this unconditional love for your child, but you can't prove that love, right? You can't prove that to your child.
Okay, well, I have a thought on this, but keep going.
Go ahead. I want to hear that.
Yeah, and this is where I think it's important to not equivocate between two different concepts just
Yeah.
because they share the same word, love.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the love between a parent and a child, I would argue that that is what's called a properly basic belief, where it's so well understood that it's not something you have to argue for.
Or even
I don't-
explain.
I don't think
Yeah.
it's that well understood. You do
The,
think
the,
it's that?
do you think it's controversial?
that parents love their children?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think it's controversial?
Well, I know not all parents love all their children,
There you go.
but
Let me
those
ask
are
you,
exceptions.
Do you dispute?
They're terrible exceptions.
Or
They are.
if I told you that I love my daughters, do you not believe me?
No.
You don't believe me?
No, yes,
You
I
would-
believe
you
you. No,
accept
I would
that.
not
You
not
accept
believe
that.
you. Yeah, I accept that. Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And
Yes.
so because we're talking about a concept that is uncontroversial and it's so common that is nothing like the God
But
proposition.
the love for God is no different than the love for your child.
It seems different to me, though.
I know you guys. I
feels
know
very
you
good.
feel that way, and I respect that. But I'm saying it's not different.
What-
Love is love.
Well, I
Love
don't.
is love.
I don't-
Hold on. Whether you love a male or female, whether you're male or female, whether you love your child, love is love. Period.
Okay, I see what you're saying. It's the same kind of emotion. It's the same sentiment.
It is. It's the same. Whatever love is, whatever
Yeah.
that is that you're describing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying is. It's transcendent. Love is love.
Okay, but
kindness is kindness.
What does that do for the God argument?
I wasn't going with the God argument. I was just
Oh,
simply
okay.
trying to. I was
He's
just
just
trying
trying to be
I-
positive.
I was
Okay.
just trying to say that it's not the argument for God or against God. It's that there are elements within all of us, within all of our being, that we exercise on a daily basis, consciously or unconsciously, that also applies to faith. So the love I have for God is no different than the love I share for my wife or my parents or my
fair.
I
siblings.
actually understand that.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's all I was. That's
Okay.
It's the purest
But-
love. It's just the
Sure.
love of
It's
other.
the love.
And
right?
I would just
I feel
mention.
like you're on my side today. I like this. Thank
Well,
you.
I think that Aaron's a good mediator on this topic
is.
because
Because I'm
he's-
stuck in the middle and
he
I
does-
see
yeah.
By the way,
everybody's
I've
story.
been in the middle, just
Yeah.
to be clear,
Yeah, I
for the
understand
listeners
that.
and everybody.
So what I would say
I've had
about love is love is I actually think that there's this stripped down idea of having an emotional, adoration for someone or something.
yeah. What
That's
do you mean
what
by that?
it sounds like. If to say love is to strip it down to its very simplest, almost close to meaningless level of love.
I was trying to get it to its purest form.
Right. And so what I would say is that the love that you have for a partner, a spouse,
Sure.
is there's a lot of attachment and attraction there. And it's not the same as loving your kids, which is a different kind of attachment without the attraction.
Your
The same
spouse
kind of-
is the only person that will ever love you for who you are.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
everyone else loves
So,
you because of what you are to
Exactly.
them.
Perfect fit to my point, and probably better than what I was going to say, which is ultimately that the reasons, the things that motivate you to love a spouse
Right.
is totally different than the things that motivate you to love a child. But it's an attachment, right? So when you have an attachment, that can be generalized, right? I can be attached to an idea. I can be attached to a car that I like or love. And I can be attached in very intimate ways to family members,
Daniel,
a spouse, and et cetera.
You said moments ago that you would do anything for your children, correct? Lay
Yeah.
down your own life for your child.
Yeah,
You do
absolutely.
anything. You would do that for your spouse, correct?
Yeah.
So that love's not different. Wait.
I just had to think.
Yeah,
We're
no, I
just
saw
double
that. I was
check-
like, so that love is the same. That the love, when I say the purest form of love,
Sure.
that's the core of it. You
Yeah.
can add to love, which is what you're describing to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
But I'm really saying your love for your spouse, your children, your parents, or whomever you love, that's transcendent.
So, and what are you trying to say with this is that there is a reality that love fits into so many different places, including.
Well,
or that
I don't know
is
if I'm trying to say that as much as I'm trying to say that that whatever the love is you have in your life,
That's God.
That's how I. That's
That's
I'm
how you
sharing.
see it.
I'm sharing
So
that's how I.
I
equate
actually
it.
do like that rationalization to say that instead of trying to identify what God is, to identify that God is
That's how I've made
all
peace
ways
with
that
it.
love is experienced. And
You've asked me before,
Yeah.
behind closed doors, or the three of us talking. How do I rationalize my faith when there are certain aspects of the Catholic Church I don't agree with? Right? You've asked me this, and that's how I rationalize it. That's how I get there. I get there because as human beings, and Aaron knows this best from seminary, we try to one-up it. We try to manipulate it. We try to do so many stupid things to it that if you remove all of that and just get back to what it's really all about, that's how I get there.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's right.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that's how I
don't
get
think
there.
it's wrong either, but I just don't think that it has a very good intellectual framework for it, because I think that
There is no intellectual framework for faith.
well, what I'm saying is you're inserting words that would make no sense to someone in a different culture, for
Of
example.
course.
So
Yeah, of course.
so there are just so many ways to rationalize the things that we don't understand, and that, to me, even though it's not an uncommon one, it sounds like a choice to me, and it doesn't help to explain things that
It
we
is a
have a
choice.
stronger
Yeah.
way of verifying, like how the brain reacts when we are experiencing love.
There's a book that was written, and I'll have to find the author, and I'm so sorry because I meant to grab it. It's a 30-year case study around the world of individuals that have had near-death experiences. Of all the people that have been interviewed, they've never met one another. So it's scientific, if you will. They all have a very similar near-death experience.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm sure you guys have seen this or heard about it. It's a white tunnel. I'm before a God-like image. It's
Good feelings.
It's
Yeah.
pure white. It's colors I can't even. The brightness I can't describe. It doesn't exist. And I wept openly because all of my sins were exposed. He saw me, or it
Some kind
saw
of
me
vulnerability
for
and
everything
feeling
I
freed
was.
of
Right.
burdens and that kind of
And
thing.
I remember reading that, and I wondered, as I was reading it, I thought, why does this have to be proved, right? And it has to be proved because we try to rationalize, or we try to find ways to articulate our belief, and we look for proof to prove my belief, right?
Yeah.
So someone went out and did a 30-year study to say, see, it exists. And then, of course, there are other people out there saying, well, I spent 30 years proving it doesn't exist, right?
Yeah, that
So
it can be recreated chemically at will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, whether you believe or don't believe, it is a personal choice. But you just have to decide what you want to believe in or not believe in.
And to a
which is
degree,
what you're saying.
We were talking about choice, and to a degree, I don't believe that beliefs are a choice.
I agree.
Really?
Yeah, I don't get to choose what I'm convinced of.
Okay.
That's right.
So, so let's expand on that for a second. You don't, repeat what you just said. I want to make sure
I
I
don't
heard this.
believe it's so meta to include this word in it, but I do not believe that beliefs are a choice. I don't, and you said it
Do
perfectly.
you choose to believe in, let's pick an easy one. Do you choose to believe in your spouse?
Believe in her
Hold on,
existence?
we're equivocating here.
in
on
what-
that.
yeah.
Her existence?
no,
her
we're not.
existence?
Do you
Just-
believe in bubble gum?
No, come on now. No, we're talking about the belief in the person, right? So whether it's a spouse or a child, you both just said
You mean belief as in support?
yes.
Yeah, so hold on, we're equivocating because
I
we
don't
were just
think we
talking
are.
about belief, whether something exists, versus
Right.
belief, in some sort
As
of
in
support.
confidence
Yeah,
or
So
confidence
do you
in that.
believe that your spouse? We won't equivocate. Here you go. Do they believe in you, your goodness, your love, your peace, your
Well,
compassion? Those are not.
Do they believe in them, or have they
all the what you
witnessed
just
them?
listed, those all fit within that one form of the word belief.
Well,
so is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
And it could be all of the other forms as well.
So I think to simplify it, I have a cup here.
I like it. It's a nice cup. It's got your
I
name on it.
believe in this cup,
Yes.
the existence of it.
Yeah.
And then to take a step closer to your second kind of belief, I also believe as in have some confidence that it will contain any liquid that I put into it without, spilling unless I tip it over. Mm-hmm. But I don't believe in it in the way that I think you can do it.
You can hold that. And by the way, the moment it doesn't, you're done with it.
That's right.
It's in the trash.
So,
That's right.
Michael,
Yeah, go
can
ahead.
I
Yeah,
want to
please,
pose
go
you
ahead.
a challenge,
Yeah,
but
go
it's
ahead.
not a...
No, you're
yeah.
good. You're good. You're good. I like it.
What would it take for you to disavow Catholicism and Christianity and become devoutly Muslim?
Oh,
What do you think it would take?
That's a great question.
I don't know the answer to that.
I do.
Go ahead.
Just being born somewhere else.
Maybe.
Yeah, no,
Maybe.
no. If you were born,
The geographic predictability of what God you
the
believe
reason
in.
you're
There's-
Christian
there
is
is truth
because
to
you were
that.
born here,
Right.
and I'm not arguing against it.
I would argue family.
No,
more
no,
than
he-
geography.
here.
No, I'm saying to you, I would argue.
I think you're right,
Western
Michael, but
European.
family is so tied to geography, so it's kind of indirect.
So I grew up in a Catholic Italian home, right? I mean, it's all on. You're
So
an altar
Aaron grew up
boy.
in Portland.
Right? So, yeah, right. But no, your point's well taken though, because I'm a product of my family. Right?
Yes,
Right.
and
And my
a very positive one from what I've learned about your family. As I said, you have the
Yeah,
superpower.
plus he seems like a nice guy.
Stop
He
it.
has the
Stop,
superpower of a
stop.
tall guy who
But
was loved.
Stop it. He kills me with this.
But it's true. No,
but-
he's
I know-
not joking.
I know he's not. But I get what you're saying though, because it is true. If I were born in the Middle East, would I have this
you would be
Christianity
Muslim,
faith?
and you would
Most
probably
likely.
be even
Right,
more
Likely to go to hell.
Right. But
Well, I mean, obviously.
and I am not. And I agree with that. I
And
don't
I'm not
disagree.
trying to shut
no,
him up. I'm
not
just
at
saying
all. I
whether
don't
it's
take it that way.
Islam or Hinduism
Right,
or whatever, like something I believe about it, which disappoints me but also seems very evident, is that susceptibility to having faith is really the only variation that
Yeah.
humans have.
Yeah.
And just wherever you are, as Jordan
Yeah.
Peterson once said back when he was more palatable, someone asked if he was Christian, and he kind of shook his head and he goes, "Well, of course I am,
Yeah.
because I was born in North America
Yeah.
in the last 100 years. What choice did I have?"
Right.
And I'm
the
shocked that he actually gave a clear answer on something.
Oh, he didn't give a clear answer. I heard that interview,
Okay.
and it was painfully
Well,
unclear.
there were some of them, and he later I've heard where it was a lot of you know, the Canadian Kermit.
Just to be clear. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
But the thing that bothered me, you and I think have talked about this, is realizing that the most faithful person is as atheistic as the non-believer
Yeah, that's right.
minus one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because of the thousands,
Yes.
tens of thousands of gods,
Yeah.
and the hundreds of different religions, and all of them incompatible. Well, maybe not all of them. Most of them incompatible with each other,
Or
because
derivatives.
their first decree is that all the other ones are wrong.
Right.
Yeah, so it's okay to think all those are wrong, but you can't think that the one that you've
The
landed
one I'm
on, the
around
Catholic
is wrong.
Church. So
Now,
let me tell you
real quick.
Go ahead.
So that used to be my evidence that none of them were right. However, at a certain point, I started wondering, isn't it funny that we always, everywhere, so far, keep coming up with basically the same framework
Yeah.
Yeah.
to make sense of this and to create social mores and
True.
behavioral patterns that are good for a people. And this was introduced back in seminary when thinking about how the original Israelites, like, they were quite often about to go extinct. And a lot of the Old Testament rules, things like not eating pork and not having sex with a woman who can't get pregnant in the moment,
clove tubes
kind of
and-
thing. All of that was
yeah.
like, because we can't afford to lose anymore.
That's right.
And I don't care if you like boys, you got to put it in her because we're almost out.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter if it's your sister.
And making more of us was such a foundation
It was.
because life has always been so hard.
yeah.
True.
But so setting aside its uses of a strong society and community group and all of that and protecting yourself from others and all, there's still that piece about trying to make sense. And that's, for me, the most compelling, but I don't really know where to go with it.
Well,
you know?
I want
welcome
to.
to the
Like
club.
we all,
wanna comment
humanity
on
has
that.
always wanted this, but we haven't figured out. Well, until Christianity, because now you don't have to be of a certain this or that.
You don't have to be of a certain ethnicity
It's
to
in a sense,
embrace
it's the
Christianity.
Walmart of religion.
Yeah,
because it's
really
got
successful.
everything you could want at
And
the
it's always
lowest
being
possible
marked down.
price.
The morals get thinner and thinner every year.
You have to believe, and
the
also,
truth.
you know,
It's the truth.
sinners have to be forgiven.
Okay, you don't have to believe. You just have to not believe.
Maybe it was George Carlin.
Gosh.
Like, basically, there's one commandment that we mostly follow, and the rest are optional.
So the reason why people subscribe to a faith is because of the 3 B's, also coming from that article.
Which are?
Belief,
you already know.
Yeah.
belief,
Yeah.
belonging, and behaviors.
Yeah,
So
there you go.
So it's people want to believe in something, and I'm talking about all of us,
Sure.
we all do. And this is
Some
not
people believe in the cults.
This is not
Right.
I
Right.
believe in the cults,
Right.
but I don't believe that they're going to win,
Right.
And I don't think they can do this. And then you want to belong in a community. That is something that is a need for us. Like, we can't escape the need for community.
Yeah.
And then it is easier for people to cope when they have some kind of guidance on behaviors. Like, what am I supposed to do? Who am I supposed to be? And you say Italian family.
Yeah.
That is part of your
Oh, yeah.
guide on behaviors. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I'm supposed to yell at
Yeah.
dinner. I have to eat mostly carbs, but
It's
red
not true.
wine,
It's small
please.
portions
Yeah.
of pasta.
I have to beat you into submission to
That's
hear
right.
me. You're right. The part I don't agree with is the belonging, specifically with the churches today. I think there's a resentment towards church in general, and I don't care what church we're talking about.
For people who don't go to church.
No,
But
for
that's
people that do go to
that's
church.
a form of
Oh, that's
belonging.
interesting.
It's a tribe.
Yeah, but
right?
I'm saying,
It's
it is.
kind of
but
one
I'm
of the
saying,
last forms of belonging.
I think you touched on it earlier, John, and that is, or Daniel, one of you did, about how religion is just kind of stabilized. It hasn't gone up or it hasn't gone down.
Yeah.
Right? There's no growth. There's no retraction. But what we see, or what I see through our friends, are people that don't buy into the church because of all the BS and all the shenanigans and all the, go ahead,
Well,
hypocrisy.
I want to use John's word about equivocating, and I'm hearing us talking about something that I think is 2 separate things, and that is faith and religion.
Yes.
Seminary, my belief coming out of it was that this religion is horse shit, and about 1/3 of the people here know that and are grifting.
Yeah.
However, the organization of the religion, the practice of it, was introduced to me as being separate from the faith. Paul Tillich talking about, every religion is an attempt to be a finger that points at God. And if you ever try to get your dog to look at the moon, the dog just stares at the hand because it doesn't understand the hand isn't the thing. It's just pointing. And that the thing you're pointing to is the faith, and that's what's important. The finger, the religion, that's just what we've come up with to kind of make
that's the
sense
best framework we have at
So
this
to
point.
your point, I think if I were to guess on the data is that people express a high degree of faith in some fashion. I think religion has declined mostly because people don't want to have restrictive practices, expectations, like the standards.
be
the standards
lied
of
to.
being a human is so low.
Or just being
at this
lied to,
point.
or the hypocrisy. Joel Osteen, as an
Well,
example.
wait until you meet people.
Well, yeah, but
Because that's
hear
the
me out.
problem.
So you've got that mega church down there in Texas. We had that huge flood down there in Houston. He wouldn't open up his church because it. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, how can if you really buy into Christianity, how is that being a Christian, right? I mean,
Exactly.
So
What are you
people
talking about? You're spreading the word.
it's
Bigger
the
and
wrong-
better than
yeah,
ever.
the wrong word. So that's what I mean about people that do have faith. Look at that and say, well, that's bullshit. I'm not going to church. I'm not buying into that. I have my faith. I'm going to practice my faith. Maybe it's with my family. Maybe it's with my friends. Maybe it's just me, which goes against the grain that we all can know, because faith is supposed to be belonging. It's supposed to be in a church. It's supposed to be spreading the word of God, love,
And
peace,
sin
happiness.
is distancing yourself
That's
from
right.
God.
That's right. But that's exactly what's happening, because we have this, I can't think of a better word than hypocrisy within the church. The Catholic Church is horrible. I mean, holy shit.
I mean, they say we're flawed.
We hid priests
And they
in other
predicted the
parishes and let them continue to rape young boys. I mean, come on. It's just so
Yeah,
bad.
every time
Wait till
I've
you hear
seen-
about teachers.
It's so
every
bad.
time I've seen a large organization where there is any power structure,
Yeah.
I've seen corruption.
Always.
So,
And
for
it's because of
example,
the
like
people.
That's
like
right.
a
That's right.
everything, a business, a school, a church, it
And-
doesn't matter.
yeah.
My father-
By the way, and I do want to say this is not a defense of the Catholic Church, but
You're
somebody
fine.
raised a really good point about pedophilia.
Yes.
The Catholic Church was the only organization that took care of orphans
Yes.
for hundreds of years,
Yeah,
probably.
Forever.
Turns out pedophiles go where the kids are.
That's right.
That's why they're in schools. That's why they're at daycares. That's why they are
Yeah.
where they are, is
Yeah.
because that's where the kids
It's
are.
hunting ground.
So I was very, had the same criticisms, and I still do, but having to back up and remind, should you be blamed for the criminals that show up to your party?
Right.
You should be blamed for what you do about them, and that's, I think,
Hide
what the
them.
criticism
Right,
is.
right.
Much like America and its history is like, there's a lot of broken promises that
Yeah,
people...
yeah.
My 98-year-old father-in-law is
Maybe passed by now.
could be.
It's okay.
You're good. You want to come back to it?
Yeah.
Okay. I got a question for you, Daniel. And it's something you mentioned in that article about what is so compelling about faith, but specifically the act of going to a church. And it's the belonging, the code of conduct. I forget the words the article actually used, but the way I think of it is
Belief, belonging, and behaviors.
So right, yeah. So the community aspect, and maybe this is kind of baked into the belonging thing, but I would add to that a transcendent experience with other human beings.
I would agree with
And for me, like I loved being a Christian. I loved going to church. My experience was overwhelmingly positive
You
because
told me as a man it was pretty great.
I mean, it was just all around. It was just great, and I played in the praise band, and
Yep.
so that checked that music box there. And I have spent, well, since I basically stopped going to church, which would have been when we started on our RV trip in 2011. That was our official severing.
Yeah, this
of
is
the
it for
cord.
us.
Yeah.
That was your goodbye.
Yeah. And I have, since that time, I have been trying to fill the void that church
That's
filled.
interesting.
Yeah, so there's not even trying to fill the Jesus-shaped hole
right,
in my
right,
heart.
right,
There's
right.
that
Yeah,
whole
right,
side.
right,
I'm talking
right,
about
right,
specifically
right.
filling
Yeah.
the
Belief, belonging, behavior.
yeah, all that
Yeah.
stuff. And have had and has found some things that have
Equally as unsatisfying.
well that fill that void to various degrees, but I will say
But nothing that
not completely,
comprehensively,
because
yeah.
nothing checks the boxes like going to a great church does. And I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, what have you done to replace that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on the belief and behaviors part, no issue. I have not needed anything I replaced.
It's ingrained.
Yeah, I replaced. And when I say replace, I don't mean like bad for good or anything like that. I just mean if you have a void in your belief system, you fill it with something. if nothing else, it's I don't know, and I'm okay with not knowing.
Sure.
Yeah.
So as far as beliefs go, that all resolved over the course of many years, but it resolved itself. Behaviors, I have a way that I think of how you identify what a good behavior is, and a system for that, and it's essentially based around the idea of doing the least amount of harm and the most amount of good for people, and including people, the earth, everything. But as far as like the belonging, so the way that I started to depart from religion started with feeling belonging in a church that stabbed me in the back. And so there was a moment in time where something significant happened that won't be aired on this podcast that was highly harmful to my family. And then that gave me reason to disbelieve that I had the belonging that I thought I had.
Yeah, I'm not part of this, I guess.
Yeah, so you think, okay, this is my family, this is my tribe, this is the place that I belong. And then this terrible thing happens that makes you think, maybe I don't belong here, but maybe what I thought I had, I also didn't have. So let me re-examine this. So my process of examining it was first, why do I go to this church? And then I thought through that, and then I was like, okay, there's a lot of good reasons why I shouldn't go to this church. That's easy. And then I thought, but should I go to a church? Why do I go to church? And then I examined that, and essentially that led to me studying, basically reading the Bible, which I had read many times, reading it again. And I chose to consciously suspend the assumptions that I introduce into the way I read anything. So when you read something, especially if it's something that you have some kind of background knowledge on, you introduce some assumptions, you fill in some blanks that aren't stated there. So if you come from a set of a theological standpoint, you fill in that gap with, we believe this, and here's the scripture that helps to support that. So you're essentially introducing all these ideas into the way you read the Bible. And so I suspended that. And so as I was reading it, the next layer came off. I'm like, okay, so church is to some degree totally different in the Bible. So what we've called church today is, there's a lot of things that it shares, and there's a lot of things that are totally different.
Yep.
So that sort of peeled away that layer. So long story short, there was enough pain with church because of a small handful of incidences that we don't feel that we need to, my family, my wife and I don't feel that we need to replace it. One of the things that solidified that is, as a non-believer, we actually went back to church. My wife was far behind me, years behind me. In fact, for a while, I didn't even tell her, right? So she was years behind me in her deconversion. But there was a point in time where we were open about this to each other, and we decided to engage in the traditional small group Bible study, go to church regularly. We were there every weekend, every Sunday. And then essentially we got criticized for not believing enough. And
You're believing wrong.
Long story short, kicked out of the Bible study.
Yeah.
Okay. And I said, I thought that the criteria to go to a Bible study is that you would go to a Bible study. And apparently it was, no, you have to believe these sets of things and submit to this authority structure as well. And so then we were like, okay, this belonging works really well for some people, but for us where we're at, it cannot serve as that, because I wouldn't be uncomfortable going to a church at all. So the way that I've filled it is this podcast, or good friendships with my neighbors, like dead serious. Like I genuinely have recurring, regular, close friendships that, you get different things from different people, right? That fill that need for, partnership, companionship, and feeling like you belong somewhere.
Well, and that is, I think, part of the allure of church and I think about jiu-jitsu in this context of it's not the only thing, but it fulfills so many things at once that a complicated life would be very difficult to do. And church can give you that social, that emotional, that behavioral, that
not to belittle it, but it's programmatic. You know, you get a whole set of things out of church. And, you know, one of the things that I thought was always remarkable is that, or notable, is that when you leave a church, you lose, not always, but generally you lose all those friends.
Yeah.
And people are like, hey, where are you? I'm like, I'm
right
surprised you even finally noticed.
Well, not at church.
It took you a while.
It's true.
Hey, I got a question. I'm conscious of time. I wanted to see if there was any particular.
Are you going to ask if we believe in time?
No. I
don't.
I don't need you to believe in time. It just is for me. And this is my reality. I don't even know that you guys are real, to be honest.
I'm a brain in a vat, personally.
If I wanted to transition by asking Jon to retell a story that very much dovetails in what you're asking.
Yeah.
But if you have kind of more questions or anything I wanted to say, this might be a good time.
No, I'm good.
Let's hear it.
Let's go.
So, Jon, you told me many, many years ago about taking your daughter to the Megachurch.
Oh, yeah.
And,
okay.
And I'll set this up by you prepared her by explaining how the transcendent experience she was about to have was engineered. Is that correct?
That's not how I remember it.
Okay, well, I wasn't there, so go on.
Yeah, so something I did with my daughters when they were younger is we would just go on a road trip together. It could be anywhere. In fact, one of them was we discovered after our RV trip that I didn't get to visit Oklahoma. It was just one day where we were like, Oklahoma was just, we were just on the other side of the border, and my family would take a lot of like side trips during the day, and I would stay in the motorhome and work. And so one trip was with my daughter just to go to Oklahoma and spend the night in Oklahoma. So it would be things like that, just kind of random stuff. Well, with my oldest daughter, I don't know how this idea came up, but we decided to intentionally go to the Creation Museum and to a megachurch. And I think my daughter just kind of appreciated the irony of it because she knew obviously we didn't go to church and weren't believers, and probably, I'm not proud of this, but that was probably during my anger phase, and I was probably openly snarky about all things.
Were you angry?
Yeah, for me, it was the full 5 stages of grief. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh,
100%.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm very interested in the 5 stages, but we don't have to cover that at this moment. So you're in your angry phase.
Yeah.
You go to the Creation
Big
Museum
open
and make
hole,
snarky.
Jesus-shaped hole in your heart.
Wow, that shapes just like Jesus.
So she picked up on that, and I'm guessing that because I had kind of been like that during that phase, as we were. I think we were at the hotel just kind of talking about going to church the next morning. I kind of caught her just kind of maybe a snarky tone in her voice and maybe even rolling her eyes, this whole thought of, yeah, we're going to go to church, that kind of thing. And then it struck me. It's like, oh, she doesn't know the altered brain state she's about to experience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And going to this service the next morning, it exceeded my expectations because we got there, and the place is just huge. It was in Cincinnati. That's all I remember. I forget the name of it, but we go and we are immediately greeted by just really nice people that made us feel perfectly at home.
And probably all very good looking.
They were, they were. And then we go into this arena style seating. Yeah. And the band is just playing. I mean, just AAA Nashville quality musicians. Yeah. I mean, the lights and everything. And then, all the praise and worship stuff there. It was excellent. It was just amazing. And then the pastor gets up, who is a very telegenic, young guy, and gives a really positive message. And then this is the part that really exceeded my expectations. This went into this impromptu baptismal service. And the aisles were lined with people just waiting to get baptized. And it was this, it was this moment of just seeing redemption unfolding in real time, and people wanting to just be the best version of themselves. And I mean, the place was electric. And when we walked out of there, my daughter was she was wide-eyed. And she was like, I get it now.
Was it Crossroads Church by chance?
Could have been.
It's I think it's one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, whatever the big church is in Cincinnati. And when it's like, she said she got it. And it was a good reminder for me too, that the allure, and when you go to a place like that that's that transcendent experience with other human beings. And when you go there already believing in a particular God, it's, of course, you're going to attribute that experience to that God you already believe in.
Yeah, of course.
But it was really something.
Yeah,
and
it's a show.
How old was your daughter at this time?
Mid-high school, something like that.
It's a show.
Yeah,
that what you described, they're here, they're in Indy, those are shows.
Well,
and I've gone to those churches. I don't like them.
I like them. I thought it was awesome.
Because
I miss it, honestly.
I feel like
the speakers under the seats, the lights.
It's a show. That's
so do you think that is...
Now, what makes you think other services aren't shows that just have lower production values?
Well, I think most churches are shows.
Well, and I would say that one of the greatest shows on earth is the Catholic Church.
Absolutely.
Because they have so much symbolism. I mean, the symbolism is
the rituals, and
and the rituals is
it's the
showmanship.
It's the Last Supper. It's the body of Christ. It's the wine.
But
it's the bread.
It's simulating something, right?
It's not simulating a rock concert. It's not simulating.
Sure.
This is why I say it's a show. Those churches, in my opinion, are trying to attract youth to get them into the fold and do exactly what happened to you.
Yeah.
Right. That's what they're trying to do.
We discussed how programming youth is sort of the foundation of any religion surviving.
So that's why I don't buy into it. And that's why, we've gone to those, we've been asked to go, we've gone. I sit there, it's awesome, it's really cool, but it's, I'm looking for more meaning. I'm looking for more purpose. I'm looking for more something.
Yeah, so one of the things
show.
that the more liturgical churches have is this deepness of meaning in the way that
and
they
the
present.
solemnness.
Each aspect has a very intentional purpose.
Yes.
Whereas in the charismatic style church, it's a little bit more of the feelings that it's generating and the experience that it's bringing, and which I enjoy far more.
Yeah, no, I get it. If I was looking for that, it'd be awesome. I used to work with this young man that was from Ireland, and he was born and raised in the Catholic Church, still went. He was in his 30s when I knew him, 20 years ago, and he said, Michael, if you tell me what week it is, I can tell you exactly what the scripture is going to be in the church. And he was not wrong. And he knew. So that whole routine, that preparation, that ritual process that we're talking about, you're spot on. You're 100% right. And there is that.
And there's many opportunities for people with autism nowadays.
That's good. That's very, very good. Anyway, I want to go back to the 5 stages. Do we have time for that? Do we?
Sure.
I guess we're not done.
Yeah, I want to hear that. So you went through the 5 stages of grief.
There's I remember when I first started pulling on that first thread,
which was
of
what?
Doubt. Yeah, so that might be worth covering because it relates to street epistemology, which this is my mental shorthand of how to explain street epistemology when using the Socratic method to ask people to explain why they believe what they believe. For many people, it is the first time them using their own voice and hearing themselves describe,
repeat,
complex issues about belief. And I remember tucking my oldest daughter in, the same one that would later join me at
Yeah,
the
right,
Megachurch. She was probably 6 or 7, and she asked me, she said, "Daddy, will I go to heaven when I die?" Which is an interesting thing for a kid to say, because that tells me how much she has internalized at this point in her life.
Yeah.
And I just tenderly explained to her that if she trusted Jesus Christ to forgive her of her sins, that and became a Christian, that she would go to heaven.
Yeah, and you reminded her of her sins, I'm sure.
Well, I think
Remember earlier when you said something mean to mommy?
Right.
When you didn't leave when Dad told you to leave. Which one is that?
I gave her what I thought was the right answer, and I'm sure those concepts were too abstract for her, but she picked up on my confidence, and it was enough for her because she smiled and closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep. Yep. And I remember when I walked,
what it needed to happen.
When I was walking out of there, I remember at first feeling really good about this tender moment that I had with my daughter, especially about something so consequential as becoming a Christian. But with each step, it turned into this very new and very uncomfortable question. And I think it was a result of hearing my own voice saying these words. It was just in my head, it was like, really? For the first time, these words sounded absurd to me. Yeah, and that was the start of it, of this exploration of just pulling on this thread. And that's what, it was probably a couple years of where just my faith dying the death of 1,000 cuts.
Can I give you, I'm going to share a thread with you. You'll find this hard to believe, I'm sure. 10 years old, Northern Illinois, Catholic church, altar boy. One Sunday after church, the whole family's in the car, and there's 6 of us in a station wagon. And I said to my dad, "How do we know the Bible is real?" Ooh. And he looked at me and said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, you know how when someone says a story and it goes around to 3 different friends, and by the time it gets to the 4th friend, it's not the same story?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "How do you know the Bible isn't like that?" That was my thread.
Nice.
And he looked at me, and I got a backhand. I didn't get logic.
So that was shut down.
I got the Italian.
Yeah.
That's the only way to respond to that question.
So
is violence and threats of harm. Yeah.
And that question haunts me to this day, right? It haunts me because of everything we're talking about. Because we know some of those books in the Bible were written 45, 50 years after, right? I mean, how in the world?
Well, you're talking about the Second Testament.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sorry, thank you.
It's also
But
the New Testament.
only to Christians.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Since Christianity
All
hijacked
right, so you two, hold on
Judaism
now.
to have authority.
I still like to call it new.
Thank you. I'm going with new as well.
It's a recent
But
testament.
40, 50 years past, there's no way that that's an accurate depiction of reality at that time.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, unless it's supernatural.
And
And by the way, the New Testament is the Book of Mormon.
is it really?
The newest.
It's the third-
newest
Oh, I didn't know
Testament.
that.
Well,
I didn't
no,
know.
it's the
But that's-
continued
that's-
Gospels
They
of
call
Jesus
it the
Christ.
third Testament or the Book of Mormon.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
And when I said those words, I felt like I was a rebel. Like
Just by
I'm
asking.
sure.
Because I was a kid, I was an altar boy.
Yeah.
I was like,
So-
how dare you question the sanctity of that book that's
that
on
was
the
a
altar?
key topic for me. That so everything else that I described earlier didn't really affect my faith as like whether or not I had it or not.
Yeah.
But it was then this topic of, I talked about the layers of kind of understanding why I go to church, and then I'm reading the Bible, and I'm like, why do I, believe all the things that I believe? And then I started to think, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Why do I believe the Bible? And so then I started to look into the history of the writing of it, which is, of course, multiple layers and
Iterations and iterations.
1,500 years of writing. So, and then I eventually got to this point where after 3 years of literally laying in bed at night, every night reading articles, just like obsessively researching this topic, eventually I said that I just can't find anything. I just can't find anything that's satisfactory that indicates any reason why we think this is true, or, inerrant is really the term. There's a term called inerrancy, which basically refers to the idea that the Bible is written by God and it's inspired by God
No
and
mistakes.
without error.
Without error.
And so, long story short, I just eventually had to let go of that idea, and then everything else was up to review.
Yeah.
And
by letting go of that idea, everything else became questionable, right?
Yeah. Up to review.
Well,
And
that's
yes,
what I meant.
questionable is a skeptical way of saying it, and it was not that I was. And in fact, I did not want to not believe.
Yeah.
And that's why I talk about the idea of believing and having a choice in that. It's like after reviewing these things at the level of depth that I did, eventually I was just like, I can't choose to understand or unsee these things.
Yeah. So if that was your first stage of the 5 stages, where did the angry stage come in?
So it was initially, it would have been just denial, right?
Yeah.
It would have been, everything's fine. This is just a glitch in my brain or a phase, it'll pass.
Yeah.
And then I remember after that was the bargaining phase.
Yeah.
And that was just, I just don't understand it right. I've been misunderstanding these passages. And then so that led to my deep dives into different ways to like read and understand the Bible. And then when it just kind of stopped holding up and just the doubts just got worse, then there was the depression.
Yeah.
Just dealing with that.
What has happened to me?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
how could I believe this?
Yeah, it was just so disorienting. And then that was kind of depression and anger. I remember toggling between those two a lot. And then finally, after a few years, the acceptance.
How did you find peace in that anger stage? Did you find peace in that anger stage?
I don't feel like I was overwhelmingly successful at that. I think just purely from the passage of time, acceptance just kind of became the thing that stuck around. But I'll be honest, there are still times of, even now, all these years later, where I will notice some non-zero amount of either depression or anger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I get it.
How many years are you into your, from the moment that you talked to your daughter at the bed?
I was even having this conversation with my daughter a couple of days ago in anticipation of this conversation. We were trying to piece the timeline together, and I think it's at 18 years.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Hey, do your daughters believe or don't believe?
No, when we left on our RV trip, which was kind of, like I said, the big reset for our family, they were 7, 9, and 11.
Okay.
So that was long enough for them to, of course, remember the ritual of going to church and to absorb some of that language, but it wasn't long enough for any of that to have been internalized or for them to have developed any kind of meaningful faith. And what I find, I don't know, I'll use the word interesting, is that there was a time where the most important thing to me was that my daughters become Christians so they will go to heaven.
Yeah.
Now I consider it my greatest parenting achievement is that my daughters have grown up to have minds that are unladen by any superstition.
Yep. Yeah. I have a question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. A quick question for the two of you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, because Aaron and I have talked about this in the past. Do you think you have to go to church to have faith?
No, I don't think so.
It's an easier place to practice it.
Sure.
And to the earlier point, community, rules.
Yeah,
all
I
of
see
that.
them as two related but very different.
Yeah,
concepts.
I agree, but I would say that if by have to, you mean required by the faith, by the religion?
Just in general, not so much a hard stance, but in the
I
general...
think it works better, so I would say generally that is the preferred model because if you don't hang around other people that share your beliefs, then your beliefs will shape and mold to whatever you're surrounded by.
Interesting.
They will change. Your beliefs will change. And if you go to church, then the very same exercise that changes your beliefs can also stabilize them.
I don't know if I understand what you're saying. I don't know if I agree with that because I think if you have faith, an unabiding faith,
Yeah.
that you don't need the church. You don't need to be surrounded by others.
Well, it's
because
not required.
No, I'm not. I know, but I'm
Yeah.
just saying you don't even need it. It may be helpful. But
Thanks,
I don't know if you
Martin
need
Luther.
it, right?
Yeah, for me, I derive so much benefit from it.
I
It's
can
hard
tell.
for me to
Yeah, I can tell.
separate.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say,
Well, you
for
may-
most people, the church is more important than the faith.
Right.
Yeah.
I would agree with you on that. A lot of people feel that way. And I could tell that about you, John, because what you said earlier about how much you enjoyed that, all of it,
Yeah.
the music and
Yeah.
everything, right? Like that was a big
Yeah,
piece of it.
it was a fulfilling life.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot
I
of
get
what
that.
you've described is the ecstasis that specific to church. You get it at sporting events.
Yeah.
You get it with Navy SEALs. You get it
Right.
with
Yeah.
anybody who is experiencing a transcendent event with others.
Join the Marines, right?
Yeah, exactly. Very
So
interesting.
what's our takeaway from this today? Do you? Oh, go ahead.
I'll share one comment to answer that question.
Go ahead.
I think that everybody together forms something that creates a society,
For sure.
and things emerge from that, and they become standard expectations on a variety of things. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's a rule, like you drive on the right side of the road unless you're a nutcase or English.
Same thing.
And then sometimes it's something that has a soft rule, like there's the lines that keep you inside of the lanes, and it's like, yeah, somehow it just feels better to stay in the lanes, even though those are just
Sure.
paint. And then other things are just like they arrive as these conventions that we follow. And I think that religion is thousands of years of that. And because the foundations of it are so old, it feels magical to us. And again, I'm not saying that as a criticism. If a religion was brand new, it would sound pretty ridiculous.
Oh yeah. Yes, it would.
Dianetics.
Dianetics
Yes.
just sounds
Yeah.
fucking ridiculous.
Yes. Yeah.
Mormonism.
But if it's thousands of years old, it's like, wow, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
There's a
I
history.
wish I could go back to those times
because
and
we must
experience
have known
that.
better thousands of years ago. It would be the argument. But, but it's
and just the feeling that
persistence.
it's survived.
Its persistence is the more interesting part, I think.
In our lifetime, do you think it stagnates, grows, retracts, religion in general? And I mean all religions, Buddhists,
I think
Christians,
people will ruin
Catholics.
the religion. I don't know that that will diminish the faith of it.
I don't think it's going away.
Yeah, I don't think it's going away either.
No, I thought that it was at one point. So
Same,
probably
yeah.
5-6 years ago, I thought it's going to
I-
be less popular.
I thought it was when
In
the
20
Catholic
years or whatever.
Church dealt with their fiasco. I really thought
I think that was a contributing factor.
I thought it was going to
But
just
yeah, there was a
go
period
away.
of time where the stats were showing, it
Yeah.
was like right now 70% of Americans identify as,
Yeah.
I think Christian, but at least religious, at least like the devoted
Of
faith.
We, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and also there's been a lot of cultural conditioning in our lifetime trying to denigrate and deny any traditional establishments like family, marriage,
100%.
church, that more than anything contributed. Don't get me wrong, scandals don't help, but the
would
fact
agree.
that generations were brought up to believe that that's foolish and worthless, and not only worthless but harmful, and much to their detriment. I mean, the
Yeah.
world is not a better place without faith. It
Yeah.
could be,
Right.
It could be,
Yeah.
but it's not.
Right.
So
Yeah, we've got concepts of a plan for that,
Yeah.
but we just don't. We
Right.
haven't figured it
you know,
out
I
how to
I
implement it
teased
yet.
a little bit about Mormonism only because it's an easier target and they're such good-natured people. But if I had to pick a neighbor, I'd start there.
Yeah, I have Mormon neighbors, and
because
they are
whether
the
or not,
nicest people.
Whether or not I agree with you, you are so good for me
Yeah.
to have in
Yeah.
my community
Yeah.
as a person, as your values, etc. And I think that was always the point of faith too, because even when looking at like Old Testament, and a lot of the stuff in context was, hey, you got to be really careful about how you treat your immediate community.
Right. Right.
Fuck everybody else.
Right.
That's why there is no don't lie. There's never a don't lie. It's don't bear false witness in your community.
Yeah.
To the people that aren't your community, I don't care. Kill them. That's why, again,
In
murder.
fact, the Canaanites,
That's the Old
I think you need to
it's
take
not
them over.
don't kill.
There
It's
you go.
not don't kill. It's don't murder out of passion. But you absolutely have to go murder those people that aren't you.
Or kill your brother because, he's more
Exactly.
favored.
Yeah, the whole point is you can't do it in the group.
That's right.
But none
That's
of
right.
these policies applied to out the group.
Yeah, right.
We quit going to the Catholic Church when all that hit. And what I was trying to say earlier is that my father-in-law...
I stopped going to Diddy's parties for the same reason. By the way, is anybody surprised at what they're hearing? Like that's what I thought those
No,
parties were.
yeah.
Anyways, I'm talking about the Catholic
I know
Church.
what
Go on.
you mean. You're funny. My father-in-law, what I was trying to say earlier, when I was up to see him the last visit, I asked him because he's a devout Catholic, and when everything hit the fan with the Catholic Church, he stopped going. And I asked him when I was up there recently if he would like to go to church or like to have Mass served to him. And he said no. And I just took a pause, and I sat back, and I said, okay. And he said, I haven't forgiven them. And I said, all right. And I said, are you at peace? And he said, I am.
Wow,
I
that's
said,
really
okay.
interesting. Yeah.
And he's on as Aaron knows, he's on his last breath. So it's like,
I'm glad he's
wow.
content.
Yeah, I am too. I genuinely am
I'd hope
happy
to
that he's
be.
at peace. So
But
that's what I was trying to say
if I
earlier.
don't find faith, then I'll just
Right.
take,
And
I'll
he has a
take
deep-rooted
mushrooms.
faith, but he does not. And so I guess that's where I was coming from earlier when I said that about, do you really think you have to have the church, in air quotes here, to have faith? Because I don't think you do.
Isn't
anymore.
that where two or more gather, though?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
The
That's
whole
right.
point of
Right.
church is
It's-
communing,
That's
not,
exactly right.
not the
That's exactly right. You're
non-profit
spot on.
501.
But I would almost say,
Yeah, right.
I would almost say that in your
Yeah.
time with him, that was what church's biggest value is
Yes.
that time that you guys
Yes.
had together.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
and that I don't think you can do
Right.
faith without.
Yeah,
I
I agree.
think that you have to have
It'd be very difficult.
some close knit network
Yeah.
that helps to support your
Yeah, I would
your
agree with
belief
that.
system.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It's a good conversation, guys.
I think that's been a good one. John, thanks for coming out.
Yeah,
and
Yeah,
John,
thanks for
you were
having
great.
me. I
Thanks
enjoyed the
for
talking
conversation.
about
Thanks
the
for
biggest
sharing.
elephant in the room.
Yeah, faith. That was awesome. That was great.
All right,
Thank
everybody
you.
have a great week.
Cheers.